Okay, great. Yeah. So the purpose of this session is to go over the worksheets or the homework assignment or the preparational assignment that you guys would have received. Um, we added some key questions there to consider some pretty important fields, like listing venues, public sale distribution, considerations, um, and just knowing what blockchain ecosystem you're going to be deploying on, what the strengths of that native community are, what type of projects do they typically see deploying, and do you fit that profile? So you're targeting basically the right community. The last one is more around just allocating inventory properly so that you can meet the requirements that you'll have when it comes to centralized exchange marketing campaigns that usually are that require some sort of token provision. Um, any sort of airdrops you might have for early users, market making inventory would be really critical piece of that initial liquidity needed. And there's always extra buckets that could come up along the way, like liquidity pool bootstraps. If you're going to spin up an AMM liquidity pool to provide some concentrated liquidity shortly after initial price discovery on sexes, if that's the route you go, do you have enough tokens to actually meet that bootstrap requirement so that the pool has some sort of stability and slippage isn't too high, meaning putting enough initial bootstrap in the pool to make it usable for the average person. So these are some of the considerations we thought were really important and kind of provided you can always fill in the gaps between them, but I think it'll put you along the right lines for how you want to set up and prepare in terms of liquidity for your TGE. So did we have an order, Kristen, that we wanted to go in?
I think it's all what you want to do. I think everyone's here except Blockade. So we've got Open Ads, Truth, Travel Swap, and Sharement.
All right. So who wants to go first? Throw a hand up. We'll
I'm fine to go through.
let's rock. Do you have the presentation or the work?
I looked through it here. I didn't fill it out on here. I have these
Okay.
questions answered though. I mean, we're going to be most likely building our blockchain ecosystem on Base. We not only are we our KOLs and we have a lot of relationships with just kind of early bootstrap liquidity providers, but gas fees transactions for microtransactions of reselling things right on being able to buy and sell an NFT on secondary it has to be really, really low cost, right? You need microtransactions and, compared to having, unlike Polygon, where you need two different tokens to transact on the network, which just completely, we've yet to see them execute on a mass level that hasn't, slowed down volume. Our best option is Base right now. And I think, just with the growth of that ecosystem, not even applying to, grants or existing things, it's probably the more robust upside, even though the argument is today is that like you are still early. It's not as, the TVL compared to ETH or something, but I just think that, especially with the success of Friend Tech and other things, it's probably the most viable chain, especially for us in doing it. ETH just is not scalable long term, as part of
Makes
it.
sense.
Exchanges you considered launching token on? I have a few friends, mostly just from the underlying quote unquote shitcoin world, that were guys that rep Polynex, KuCoin, Mexi, and so I had put out some things to them, just taking the consideration of what you said, allocations and the revenue tiers of I think it was like 75,000 in native cash in there to try and kind of start those, but no, I don't. In a perfect world, you can get Binance or Coinbase, right? Or you can get Gemini, right? However, that's your big, hairy, audacious goal. That's probably not happening day one unless I can wiggle the best relationships I have, that somehow make something like that happen. But and then yeah, I mean, we will have liquidity on Uniswap and something else too there, and
Mhm.
trying to look in where AMMs play a role, kind of around that. We have strategy around, especially on dexes. I have, you're not allowed to provide liquidity to your own group, but you can have your community or, groups around it help provide liquidity and stability. And so that's, obviously allocating the appropriate amount to be able to offer that. Token sale strategy for us. We're going to all of our people who already use our platform, both on a commercial scale and retail scale, that are qualified, right? Your easiest way to go and sell, at least privately, is to people that are going to be using your platform organically. Prior to that, I have another network group of just private DCs, family offices, which we'll all approach. And then based on what legal says, who else am I able to sell to where I'm not running afoul of accredited investor laws or crowdsourcing laws as far as, that. But ideally, a majority of the token sale is going into people that, are seeing this as a long-term investment and are very aligned to the protocol. All of our strategy around selling it is there, because that's how you're going to ideally limit the least amount. You're going to have the least amount of sell pressure, with that. Liquidity strategy. I have ideas. I have to see if they're legal or not. Can I, what are the rules around us seeding a liquidity pool prior to a launch, to provide things, how, farming incentives or pre-farming, like things like how can I do around that? I have a lot of interest around those things. Because of where we are in the US, I have to figure out where my line is that I don't cross. But that's kind of my run through on it. I don't know. Happy to answer any questions.
Yeah, no, that makes a lot of sense. I think we could start backwards. So because you're in the US, so you have a lot of restrictions and regulatory concerns around providing DEX bootstrap from your own books, capital from your own books.
Right.
Because you farming incentives to attract third-party LP providers might also be a gray area or a sticking point. Because effectively you're doing the same thing. You're just basically rewarding them for doing it directly. That's the problem, really, that direct handoff of those rewards.
But
potentially.
isn't that kind of like the same relationship as like a market maker?
Well, the only difference is you aren't loaning those rewards to them, and then they're making use of it.
Yeah.
So there's no repayment back.
Yeah.
So that's the critical difference between the ownership of assets.
Yeah.
While these activities are happening.
If a third-party company came to me and says, Eric, we want to stick $4 million in your liquidity pool, are we able to do that on our own accord? Of course, they're able to do that.
Of course they can. And if they wanted to enter into a loan agreement for you where you loan them X amount of tokens for ecosystem development and support for 5 years, with minimal legal interest rate attached to it, then,
we're safe that's probably something that can be done too. You've seen that executed by a US company, because that's what I'm trying to figure out is like, what ways can I creatively use these funds that are being offered to me, but make sure they're like that way, You
could have built into a loan agreement with a market maker. You can explore part of the loaned capital to be used for on-chain liquidity. Now you might not be able to call out LP provision on an AMM, but I think it's going to come down to what your legal's comfortability is. But it would have to be over the course of a loan rather than coming from your own books and where you own those assets directly, or B, rewarding someone directly outside of a loan for providing third-party liquidity. I believe, unless you have, is the token issuing entity a offshore company?
I'm assuming it will be. Yeah, almost all of them.
Yeah,
Yeah.
they have to be unless you go. Yeah.
Yeah.
So the I think that could help, but end of the day, it depends. It depends on who's on the cap table, who has ownership eventually at the end of the road of that entity, and are they U.S. citizens? So
Yeah. But you're
something for
saying out
legal
of
to
out of
happen.
basic concept, if a group said they wanted to provide liquidity,
Mhm.
that's safe. There could be you could allocate token supply to give them on loan on a longer term agreement with something,
Mhm.
and that is a I'm gonna put this in quotations, safe framework or general framework that you've seen people successfully execute. And
I've seen people do that with non-US VC.
cool, perfect, awesome.
And but the regulatory risks change, it feels like, monthly. So you'll definitely need to get a legal opinion about that. But yeah, for sure, adding or making sure that there is a presence of concentrated on-chain liquidity seems pretty important. Um, when you said, also going back to another point, when you mentioned doing public sale distributions or private sale distributions to kind of the core end user, people that have a long tail kind of horizon on holding the token and see the value of what's going to be built around it and the utilization of the native currency. That would mean that, to me, that means sort of like an ICO style model where you're doing these sort of rounds off, your own paperwork and not utilizing external third party IDO platform or maybe an IEO on an exchange, which is fine. It was more kind of 2017, 2018 flavor, but I still see it being done through pre-sales. That
How so? I guess just maybe you can ask it this. Meme Land, as far as their token strategy, they just had a launch here, right? And you saw them. They didn't. They offered pre-sale, but then they also
the
were
NFT
raffling.
holders.
Yeah, and then they were raffling off spots that came with token allocations. But I'm assuming because they sold those as raffles and not tokens, even though you were getting tokens, if you won the raffle, they were able to source liquidity via that. And so I was like, that was a very unique way of, I feel like, them backing into funds for a token sale, but riding this gray area of, well, you're buying a raffle ticket to get a spot in it and to claim some tokens. But I've I just I've had my eye on them. They had a very successful launch. Obviously,
Yeah,
they're doing stuff. I know
major.
guys doing stuff, and so but I think that would ride probably a gray area line. I mean, they're headquartered in Hong Kong, so they get a lot of
Yeah, they're
more leeway.
definitely, especially over the last few quarters, things have really gone positive there. Um, and so yeah, keep in mind that different regulatory regimes have different requirements.
All right, come on, bud. We'll just see.
And then I think otherwise everything seemed pretty straightforward. I was surprised that you said you put Gemini in the same category as Binance and Coinbase in terms of liquidity venues, and because to me it's the third most liquid exchange in the U.S. behind Coinbase and Kraken.
Well, we process all of our crypto to fiat transactions through them. We're a business
So there's
customer, so we use their like Travel Swap. We can take your ETH, sell it for fiat, no slippage, because we use Gemini's API. So in a perfect world, they would do that, but I don't know the correlation between their B2B department and their coin, and I doubt that those.
very different. It's very different.
I
Um,
don't have anyone. So if
no,
you have an
no,
in
that's
at Gemini, I would love to ring that
no,
door.
no. We know people on Gemini's institutional team, of course, because everybody needs market makers. So it's uh, I would say that in terms of retail venues to kind of widely create accessibility to your token. Um, in the US, the best regulated exchanges based on user size or the breadth of users. And you can kind of see how Base grew based on Coinbase's onboarding process, 11 million or a million wallets in 11 days, something like incredible like that. Coinbase would be number one, and Kraken would be number two from our perspective. And Binance US does have some merit. They are operational. Gemini, I would say, is a really high rubber stamp as well. If you could get that listing done.
I still don't understand how
On
they're the only ones that have Pepe and how that got done, considering that
It's a great
Coinbase
point.
won't list them and do stuff. And so I just, that's what's
It's a great
confusing
point.
about this stuff. It's like you can't pay, but then coins make it on these exchanges that you're like, oh,
Volume. Yeah. 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 They want users. They saw there was a gap in the US market with an extremely high demand asset, and they decided that it was safe for them, or safe enough for them to list. Um, Maybe Coinbase doesn't want to take that risk right now because they're already engaged in litigation. Hard to say, and I wouldn't want to speculate too much about it. But it was interesting to see that Gemini be the only exchange to list that. But
yeah.
but Binance definitely is the king of the liquidity pool in terms of sexes. I would say OKX is also pretty close to top of the mountain. So have that one in your targets and your sites as well. But that was all the comments that I had. And I appreciate you taking the time on that.
I have a question, Eric. So I like the idea of launching on Base. I like the idea, but supporting token natively on Base. Right now, obviously, Coinbase is the main venue for Base tokens, and from other retail exchanges, I think support is still scarce. Like I have seen, I think MEXC supporting tokens natively on Base already, but probably not other exchanges yet. Obviously, when you launch a token publicly, the picture will be different. But do you consider like bridging token Ethereum and MET as well? Like on your side, like what would be your recommendation when, let's say, we are launching token on Base, but only Coinbase and MEXC supports Base at the moment?
Yeah, so I'm making a slight gamble that in the next 6 to 9 months, as this goes to it, that support will most likely be there. I'm never a fan of migrations. I've seen them done by default protocols and everything, and it's like if it's a matter of waiting an extra few months or 6 months versus launching prematurely and then having to migrate. We were even evaluating having our NFTs that were going to be on it, not deploying them on Base, but deploying them on like layer 0, so then they can be bridged and going like the omni chain route. But that really doesn't obviously exist for like the token side. But I mean I'm making the bet that it's going to be a supported chain just as every other one, right? Arbitrum was like that, and it cleared that hurdle, right? You can send funds now and do that. I mean, that's what I have. Maybe they won't, but I'd be very surprised with the amount of money. It's the most well-funded, most well-capitalized chain. I believe that's currently. I mean, they have grant money. Everywhere else is poor and kind of blew their treasury and their business development funding. Polygon has no funds. AVAX, I mean, I know has stuff, but nobody's going to AVAX. No one's going to Metis or Fuel or any of these other chains. And there's only so many chains that support microtransactions, right? When you're, on that type of scale. And so, but yeah, I mean, that's all I got, Vano.
Yeah, if you're willing to wait, then you'll you'll have that infrastructure to be able to support your launch and kind of de-friction the withdrawal and deposit and listing engagements with various exchanges. So I think if it's something that you had a run up in the next 2 months and you couldn't wait for it, it's such a limiting factor. You would almost have to deploy some of the supply on ETH just to get those listings done on that token standard, and then utilize a bridging solution when people want to actually use the token utility. They would have to bridge over to Base.
And if we needed to build that, we could easily build that, right?
Yeah, it's been done before.
Yeah. But I would be surprised if within the next 3 to 6 months that more of that wasn't there. And if it is, then
I agree.
do that. And I'm also banking. I'm confident we could support deep enough DEX liquidity on that chain, even if we had to pre-sell it enough that it would affect it. So
yeah, I'm looking at Diamond Swap currently. That's coming to market. That'll be, it looks like an interesting DEX on Base. So I think you'll get plenty. I think TVL will balloon there. I think they'll have a serious growth like in TVL. And I do think those integrations are probably already in the pipeline with the centralized exchanges. They're just behind. They're just in the queue, essentially. So yeah, cool. Who would like to go next?
I can go next.
Awesome.
Here, how about I share my screen? So yeah, we're building on-chain advertising protocol. So it's a little bit different than just selling a token or just having a token. As the core functionality of the token powers the system. So we're still early on as well. So we know we're building on ETH right now, but as far as like producing tokens, is it going to be an L2? Probably, but are we just going to do an L1 and bridge? Because when we were filling this out, we weren't sure if sexes were offering that, like what you were just talking about with Base. Like, I mean, everything was ETH last time I was doing lots of transactions into and out of sexes. So there we go. So yeah, that's our ecosystem. And I think we're still debating which L2. So that's how early we are. Where to list? We know we're going to do DEX, some DEXs, and for the sexes, frankly, we're just like, how do you do it? We don't even know, like, from the beginning, like, is it like literally just emailing people and just sorting it out? Where's the best? Like, we have an idea of, like, of course, everybody wants Coinbase. Everybody wants, Binance internationally, all the good ones. But, like, realistically, are you there? Like, no. So, like, where's the tier 2s that you should be rather than just the shitty ones? How do you navigate that? And it's all something that we need advice on, and are like willing to listen to everything. So like the talk yesterday was really good, and it was really informed a lot of the stuff where we're just like, we don't know anything. So
that's the first step. That's the first step to not making critical errors.
Yeah, and so token sale is, we know we're gonna do like a couple private rounds. We're thinking of doing an ILO where we're going to bootstrap our advertiser and publisher relationship by giving free ads to advertisers by guaranteeing publishers a certain amount of money earned if they integrate our tech to show ads. So it's like we start a system there where we can get a lot of people in the system and get the transactions to buy and sell ads on our.
Is that similar to like a minimum guarantee in a sense?
I don't know. It's a term that we were just we came up when we were brainstorming with the HLV guys, Vince. And it was like, if we kind of have a bootstrapping program there, it saves us from doing a whole bunch of like back and forth working up a marketplace. How do you work up you need both sides. So if we can guarantee payment for the publishers by getting a liquidity pool going where we haven't figured it all out.
Yeah, I'll
yeah.
just chime in. Like,
Yeah,
so
makes sense.
the idea is like, and this is still like super early, but so like venture-backed startups use VC money to, subsidize their users, right? We've identified users that are, that we'd like to subsidize in our network, right? In this case, it's the advertisers for this ad network that OAP is building. And we kind of thought like, hey, why would we use our venture money, aka our equity, right? Why would Chris and Mike use their equity to subsidize these advertisers? Is there a more potentially capital efficient way to do that? And we have this thesis that a token might be a good way to do that, right? Because it's not equity and it's not equity at the same time. It's something kind of in the middle. And so the idea is that we would set, maybe $1 million, $2 million in this ILO concept where we would do this token sale potentially to institutions, potentially to retail, to raise, X million dollars in USDC. And that USDC would go to exactly what Chris was saying, which is to subsidize the advertisers on our platform rather than using the cash that we raised. And on the back end, we still have to think through it, right? But like on the back end, you'd just be purchasing not necessarily an airdrop, but like a claim to the future OAP tokens and potentially some type of sweetener incentive to, invest your cash into this liquidity pool. The issue here, though, is like, and there are a lot of issues with this that we still have to think through, but like each dollar used in this pool is like gone, right? Like when you raise $5 million, yeah, right. So like each advertising, as the network grows, like the pool of the available ad subsidy drops. So is there a way to incentivize either more liquidity to come on, or do we have to raise a mega round at the beginning to do this, right? And so there's kind of, it sounds great, but like there are a lot of holes that need like really deep thought and consideration to execute on. But that's like the very high level concept, right? Is really just transferring like the cost of capital from the equity to the token.
Gotcha.
Yeah.
You always have more tokens than equity to give away, right?
I mean, yes and no, right? Like you said, you don't want to be like super liberal with your token, just throw it around. Sure. Like you want it to have value, and you want it to be, like we're all doing this. It's not an easy thing. You just spin it up, right? So it's like you have to be like very delicate and careful and thoughtful with how this would work. And then we also at the same time we have to think about like value accrual for the token too, right? Like if it's just a mechanism to account for the USD that will be raised, like, and there's no use for the token, then it'll just go to zero, right? And like,
definitely,
no one's happy. So like, yeah, I mean, that's why I think this OAP is like really unique from a token perspective, because there are a lot of really cool considerations and levers to pull here. It's just, the devil's in the details.
It makes sense.
Yeah. So we've got as far as like calling it an ILO. Like there's a lot of details, as Vince has said. So, this whole strategy is to be determined, and I don't think it's exactly just like by the playbook, but we'll figure it out.
Oh, you definitely will. No doubt about that.
And liquidity strategy. So yeah, like we're kind of just like, okay, we don't know. Like, we're so
it's too early.
It's
too early for that. So, but keep this, because in the future, once you do have some framework around the ILO, and you are going to have to support the token for trading eventually, so it has some redemption value on the open market. If it's not being redeemed for what the platform or protocol is offering, and people want to trade that value, just keep in mind that have that additional liquidity provision available, the additional tokens available to meet capital requirements for exchanges, whether it be marketing, listing requirements they might have as market making inventory to provide a certain amount of stable liquidity in an order book. And then you said you definitely want to do a DEX. Well, that does also require some token allocation when creating that liquidity pool.
Right. I mean, I think this, yeah, like I said, it's still just too early for us to like make concrete decisions. So, I mean, we're set on the right path though. So
Definitely. Awesome. Thank you. Thank you for sharing that. Anyone up next?
Yeah, sure, I can go. So we are working on a referral protocol, Sharemint, and let's see what to put in here. So in terms of the blockchain platform, so our main platform is Ethereum, and of course we will be working also on all EVM based L2. This is what the product is already working in, and but this is our fast so Ethereum mostly, but potentially like spreading payments and other stuff on an L2. It doesn't matter who right now, potentially Polygon, but this is the ecosystem. Like we're not looking into something else. Exchanges. So in terms of exchanges, I think it's the regular answer. DEXs, we will want DEXs. We'll want Uniswap for sure. Potentially, if there is a value in adding it to PancakeSwap and SushiSwap and more, that's fine. And for sexes, it really depends, and it depends on the funds that we raise, and it depends on the connections that we make. So I would say we're gonna start with the smaller ones, and hopefully work our way on top to the top. But if you have any like suggestion here, because I think this is like the most like default answer, right? So
It is, but it's flipped. Reality, the path of least resistance is a top-down approach rather than a start small and build up. The reason being is it's much easier to get on a higher ranked exchange through an initial or premier listing than it is to get on a secondary listing. Because when there's a secondary listing, they have the ability to poke holes in the thesis of they have ability to look and see what's happening, A, on chain, and B, on other sexes, to kind of gauge real market traction. And the hype and promise of token market traction typically outplays or overplays the reality, at least early on in the token's life cycle. Just because it takes time to build a user base, and it takes time to refine user habits so that they're actively participating with the token. And there's enough churn for the protocol to drive some daily demand in the market as well. So it also takes time to build a bigger footprint, to get more people and cast a wider net, and have those people stick. So I totally think that the best bet is put your best foot forward, make yourself as interesting and enticing to the larger sexes upon initial listing, or ahead of the initial listing, ahead of the TGE. Convince them why it's going to be a good idea to list you first, and then the other smaller exchanges tend to fall in line really quickly. So you don't have to convince them on the way down, but you have to keep convincing everybody on the way up, and it gets harder and harder to do that as you move to higher ends. So a lot of the focus is creating those relationships and connections, using cold campaigns, user acquisition strategies, airdrops, and some incentives to show strong on-chain traction and user growth. Having enough, organic web traffic where they can track on SimilarWeb and some other website tracking or web tracking or app tracking platforms or tools. These are the different things that centralized exchanges will look at when they forecast how many users they're going to win, or new traders they're going to win through listing an asset. And that's the listing manager's primary KPI, is how many new accounts are are going to be made because we listed this token early on. And what revenue is it going to bring? That's how they're judged by their superiors.
Sounds like a lot of that comes down to really building a community, right? Like
You
if
got
you
it.
have, that's like, you know, there's two sides of crypto, right? There's the retail side and there's the institutional side. And, you know, both play like two very different roles in an ecosystem. Like, so yeah, I mean, if you have an army of, you know, tens of thousands of community supporters, like on Twitter and, you know, doing like community oriented, you know, evangelism or BD, right, on behalf of the project, like you're very much likely to get like really great listings and really great responses if you otherwise don't have that. Now, I'm not a marketer, but and I didn't know how to advise on how to build a strong community, right, to do that. But, you know, the best projects, regardless sometimes of even products, you know, have, or at least the most well-known, you know, really have strong communities that, you know, either help or hurt them. But at the end of the day, it's what drives sometimes, you know, some of the things that we see in the market.
I think you could use the massive and rapid growth of the non-fungible token market in the previous cycle as a direct example of how strong community is. And NFTs have that unique ability to tap into an emotional identity based on the uniqueness of the profile picture or the NFT itself, the artwork behind it, the location of the land in the metaverse, whatever the case may be. So NFTs really were perfectly fit to create these hyper evangelizing communities that were really vocal and were sort of word of mouth marketers to the broader crypto you know, user base. So fungible tokens a little bit different because you don't have that ability to tap into emotional connection necessarily as simply, but there's plenty of token projects that are successful that have built robust communities around engaging with them, being active, listening to them, getting validations from Coles and influencers that they believe are high reputation based on previous track record. So you get them to come on and be ambassadors. You get the right ambassadors to the project to help kind of promote the merits of what's being built. Those are really important to attract, to meet the certain metrics that large exchanges are going to want to see. And when you get the better exchanges at listing, it creates it gives you a better road to lasting liquidity.
Yeah, it makes sense. And we actually have some type of NFT strategy for our project. So potentially the way to go would be to first release these NFTs, really create this big community, and then start talking about listings and the token launch.
Absolutely, and make sure your moderator team is in love with the community because and eats, breathes, sleeps them because they're very demanding. They love information, and it really is working in the trenches and being available pays dividends at the end of the day.
Yeah, makes sense. Cool. Okay. So the next one is strategy. We didn't choose one yet. All we know is that the difference between us and the rest of the teams here is that we're not US based. And we're still not 100% sure what does it mean. Like what options are open to us that are not open to US based companies. So I've thrown here that I've used CoinList in the past, and it was nice, but it was a couple of years ago. But I liked the launchpad process, and I know that they got a lot of new users because of these launchpads. But I'm not entirely sure what's basically the meta for tokens in this next wave. So not sure if CoinList is even an option.
It remains to be seen what the meta will be.
Yeah.
What the meta has been in the last, let's say, 18 months has been don't
Releasing meme
launch.
coins.
Don't launch your token if you're
Or just a meme token. That's it.
or be a complete degenerate and gambler and just play with meme coins, which, by the way, I do enjoy sometimes. It is very fun.
You think so though, Matt? Like, I mean, over the last 2 months, we've seen at least 4 gaming tokens launch at over, $70 million FDV and kind of holding those. I think Shrapnel just launched today, went out at 300.
Yeah, so I would caveat from mid-October onwards, just because the market is so dramatically different than it was in September and the summer.
Also, like today it's gaming. Yesterday it was like Unibot forks. Tomorrow it'll be Friendtech and Friendtech forks. So
bullish for base. I think, yeah, Shrapnel. That was an interesting one because they really didn't do any marketing of their token on their own social, of the token launch on their own social channels. In fact, the listings, they only announced, hey, we have a partnership with this exchange, but didn't even indicate that there was a listing event happening. So I guess being based in the US, they were extremely cautious.
Yeah,
with talking about token sales. That's what it seemed like to me. I didn't even see any calls really talking about it.
Saying something, but
saying something and connecting to that other to the counterparty, but not actually announcing listing on a secondary market whatsoever. It made sense. They're in Seattle, Washington, so that made a lot of sense to me. But for Sharman, you don't have those constraints, which is good. You can be way more vocal, create call to actions, CTAs around participating in the token economy, even on the secondary trading markets, doing AMAs with the exchanges, kind of due to the run up of these launches, of the token launch, doing deposit campaigns, all sorts of things to get the most participation, incentivize people to participate, and also win the attention of the centralized exchanges native user base to kind of become part of the community of Sharman. So I do think NFTs, especially if NFT market continues to heat up, will be a really great way to build that instant community and that and grab that emotional attachment there. So that would be really strong. I think for exchanges, for launch pads, I don't think there's anything wrong with an IEO at this stage, as long as you do it on one of the top platforms, which is extremely difficult to pull off. I do agree. However, the value return for spending the time to make yourself a project that the exchange is looking for those liquidity events, for those vehicles, are is lopsided in your favor. It just puts you in a class of very elite projects that are very few. Doing IDOs on launch pads that are not native to exchanges, that have a track record of supporting launches of projects that are in line or have sort of intersections with the type of project that you are and the category of asset you're launching is important. C2Fi, for instance, focuses on gaming. They've added AI because everybody added AI as a category. Just how the industry goes. DAO Maker has been sort of just broader really more agnostic. So there's these Chain GPT specific to AI project launches. So you can find different launch pads, and for you, Eric, as well, you can see if you can find some IDO platforms that are more aligned with the purpose of the asset, what category it'll fall into, what in terms of the use case and the type of project you're deploying.
Ava's the only other travel token in existence, which is
Tra-
coin.
That was Travala, yeah, and that was
Binance.
acquired by Binance.
Well, it was bootstrapped by Binance. It's Binance's little unicorn. Yeah. So it's all on BSC. But yeah, so I don't. Maybe we can use that. Be like, we're the second travel token in existence.
We're the based.
Or the first one on
Travel
Base. Yeah,
too.
I guess that's thing too. So I guess
Yeah. That sounds like it should come with the Coinbase listing then. For Sharement, I think you want to target the international exchanges. You want to look at the Binance, OKX, Bybit, KuCoin, see if you can achieve an IEO, either a spotlight listing, OKX Jumpstart. For Bybit, it would really be using their IDO platform, their Web3 product, because they don't really do IEOs anymore. And then I don't think doing an IEO on smaller exchanges makes much sense. They just don't have deep enough liquidity there to justify it. And also the distribution of those tokens is opaque. It's not on chain in a sense. So are they really distributing those tokens to the users, or are they not? It's hard to say for sure, right? So with external launch pads that are on chain, you actually see the distro of those tokens, different wallet holders, and then you track the wallet holders and as they deposit into sexes and stake and do other things that you provide utilities for them. So
yeah, makes sense. Okay, cool. And for the next one, so liquidity strategy. Same for us. It's too early to really think about it, but I just wrote that we will take into account all of these considerations when we finalize the allocation. It's still not 100%.
Well, Vanu and Vincent will point you in the right direction with that. That's for sure. They know how it's done. Awesome. Thank you for sharing.
Of course.
Yeah.
Okay.
Hey guys.
Okay.
So
Go ahead.
we are not prepared at the moment. We just got our 3D release out, and we're literally in the middle of doing that. So
No worries.
not prepared at the moment.
No problem.
Yeah, I think Truth popped out too, so we're all good.
Okay. Well, they're there for you to keep, and those considerations are going to be important when it is the time for you to start to focus on the launch and the tradability of the token. You can always reach out to me or our team if you have any specific questions that you need help with. Once it becomes more appropriate in your timeline, I'd say 60 to 90 days prior to launch is a pretty good time to start having these conversations, start really thinking in depth about them. Especially when you're looking at base, taking a peek and seeing what sort of exchanges support withdrawals and deposits, 2 to 3 months out from when you think is a good time to launch. That's a good time for you to start to thesis test. I'm here to support you guys best we can, and I really appreciate your time.